Last year, I played a bunch of great indie games. Today, I'm going to talk about them. Not every single game released last year, but most of them did. If you want to get some new games to add to your backlog, this is the video for you. Fair warning, there's a lot of platformers in this video. That's why there's over 30 plus games on this list, because you can go through platformers pretty quickly, so forgive me and my platformer bias. Let's go. Let's start with the indie game that everybody already knows about, Balatro. Yes, indeed, it is an incredible game, and since I've put dozens, if not well over 100 hours into this game, and I know many people have done a whole lot more, if there's any indie game that should have deserved to be in the Game of the Year conversation last year, it's this one. This combination of like roguelike poker with like a million different outcomes thanks to the Joker cards you can get. Like, dude, there's just so much into this game, and if you watch it and you don't know what's going on, like, I get it, it takes a little bit to get into, but then suddenly you start watching other people play the game and you're like, oh, I would have done that, or hey, you're stupid, I would have done this, and then, oh, I'm stupid, I wouldn't have done that. And there's just so many different ways to approach this game, and with all the different options that are already in the game, with potential DLC down the line, like, yeah, of course, Balatro is the indie game of the year. If we're gonna talk about a bunch of games that are under the radar, let's start with talking about the most obvious one, right? Play Balatro. Did you catch the Balatro bit during the Game of the Year's orchestra? Like, that was awesome. Play Balatro. Isles of Sea and Sky did something that I never even thought possible before, making a really fun and immersive story-based game all around the classic idea of just a bunch of block pushing puzzles. You play as this little guy, you are traveling across a bunch of different islands, and every single island with almost every single screen on those islands has some group of block pushing puzzles, and the immersive quality in this game with the music and the sound effects and the really subtle storytelling, along with just the really solid 8-bit aesthetic, I was blown away by this game. There's this underlying theme throughout the entire game of just what are these secrets holding? Like, there's something going on with the main character, there are these mysterious shrines that you're consistently getting little keys to unlock, but what's behind there? I don't know. And it's all told in a gameplay structure that's just, hey, you gotta push these blocks around, either to put them on little pedestals or to just get past the obstacles. It's remarkable game design, actually. This is a genre blending that I had never even thought of before, but now that I'm here, I'm in love. Fantastic game. The selling point of Kitsune Tales for me is that it is basically a Mario 3 styled game with a huge Japanese aesthetic. You play as a little fox girl, there's yokai all over the place as enemies, the music is really catchy. I dig the gameplay from point A to point B in this game. It's just a really fun 2D platformer with influences of the 8-bit generation that are very, very apparent. I am a-okay with that. There is a lot of story in this game about this Kitsune and these other girls that she's in love with, and it's like a love triangle, and like it's kind of cute. The voice acting, I will say, not really my thing. It's a bit over the top, and it's cuteness, I guess I will say. Basically, I'm not a fan of the story, I will say that much, but mechanically, I really dig this. If you want a modern adaptation of the classic Mario aesthetic, and maybe you'll like the story, I don't know, put Kitsune Tales on your list. This is also from the same people who brought the Bernie Sanders platformer to life, so hey, why not, right? You Are Peter Shorts is a stupid video game. You play as Peter Shorts, you have been kidnapped while you were just doing some grilling and relaxing, you're put in a factory, you have been cloned to a bunch of different forms, now you have to run throughout this facility, take down all the other Peters, and I swear to God, everything in this game is a Peter, and you do this with like Smash Brothers style combat in these little micro arenas, okay. And yeah, you just do that, but it's awesome. Look at him. Look at this stupid little guy. I love him. There's a multiplayer mode where you can put a bunch of different Peter play styles up against each other. Like, God, this is one of the stupidest games I've ever seen in my life, but I adore it so. It's a Metroidvania / Smash Brothers style game with cool 8-bit style. I love it. It's so dumb. I love it. Victory Heat Rally sold me the second I saw a single screenshot. I love arcade racing games, and combining that feel with this classic pixelated aesthetic and this really catchy music, it's so quick and it's so snappy. This is exactly what I want in a racing game. It's all about going fast, nailing your turns, doing a bunch of drifts, and getting a whole bunch of boosts. Go as fast as you can and, hey, knock out the opposition along the way. Why not? The races are just so exhilarating. A combination of just where the camera is placed behind the car and the zoom lines as you're going fast. It feels feels fantastic to play. Everything is presented in this very simple campaign mode. Sometimes you're not even racing, sometimes you're doing a challenge, like getting a whole bunch of these cones out of the way before you hit the finish line. You're meeting a whole bunch of different racers along the way, you're seeing a whole bunch of different landscapes throughout. As far as an arcade racer goes, VHR is a positive attack on the senses at every single turn. And as someone who doesn't really like a vast majority of racing games out there, this is one of my favorite ones that I think I've ever played. And another notch in the hat of Platonic Friends. Very excited to see what they publish in the future. Their track record is pretty good. Akimbot appeals to such a specific niche in my head. If you liked Ratchet & Clank specifically during the PS2 and PS3 era, then this game is for you. There is a story and it is entertaining hearing these characters talk because the voice acting is entertaining and the main character with your little floating guy, their personalities go against each other. It works really well, but I'm here for the gameplay. This is a 3D run and gun platformer shooter combo and it feels great, and this is just, man, this is just a game that's trying to be inspired by Ratchet & Clank, and it hits it perfectly. You got these moments where you're running around these islands and whatnot, you're gathering health, you're gathering money, and you can go into these shops where you can buy new weapons and upgrades to those weapons, and then you go directly into combat, and it's totally bombastic. There's lasers and explosions going all over the place. You got these hacking sections, because once again, we're trying to be Ratchet & Clank here, and I'm totally for that. Obviously, while that franchise has continued into the current generation, this feels like a perfect modern love letter to specifically the PS2, PS3 era of character action games. It came out of nowhere, but damn it, I love it so. Akimbot is so damn cool. Bakaru may have originally released as a Switch exclusive in 2023, but it seemed like it would never get localized. Somehow, last year, it did, thanks to Spike Chunsoft. This game was made by Good Feel, okay? They just made Princess Peach Showtime, and this game is better, and I was so worried that this game was never going to be showing up in American stores, and it did, and that's awesome. In another example of a classic sort of throwback style 3D platformer, Bakaru, the whole selling point is, okay, you are a little drummer boy, a little taiko master, you use those things as weapons, go throughout all of Japan, like actually all of the levels are different regions of Japan, that's awesome, and you partake in a bunch of combat, you partake in a bunch of platforming, it's very bright and it's very colorful, you feel very strong, like it's not a hard game in the slightest, if anything, it's a little bit too easy, but just the fact that we have a modern adaptation of essentially a Goemon game, something that Konami has been sitting on forever now, it was just so refreshing from start to finish. This is one of those games where typically I feel this way with any Good Feel game. I don't go into them expecting a challenge, I go into them to just have a feel-good time, hence the name of the company. And if you're fascinated by Japanese mythology, collecting some trivia from little Japanese poop nuggets, transforming into giant robots, and driving in super fast cars, like dude, Bakaru is for you. It'll always be a shame Nintendo themselves didn't promote this game, but hey, Spike Chunsoft, thank you so much. I guess Good Feel does technically qualify as an indie developer at this point. Sure, this is better than the Peach game they made, so kudos to them. I am somewhat of a new fan of the horror video game genre. It was not something I was ever into back during the PS1 era, but as time has gone on, I've grown a massive appreciation for games that try to capture the PS1 aesthetic while making them scary, and Alyssa hit that perfectly. You want your crappy voice acting?
Sorry for bothering you, sir. We are looking for a man.
Oh, it's here. You want your fixed camera angles and limited ammo? That's here. You want this mysterious building filled with a whole bunch of creepy monsters around every single corner? You have no idea what's going on for the vast majority of this game. That is here. This is a love letter to classic Resident Evil, and because I'm not really that big of a fan of the classic tank control style Resident Evil games, I like this better. I think Alyssa's very good. The in-game shop is run by like a little hand puppet dude. Like that's awesome. When I learned that horror games of this style are not necessarily about the scariness, it's more so like a kind of creepy Metroidvania, everything started to click a whole lot more. So if you're like me and you never really gave the horror genre a shot, check out Alyssa. You may be surprised. And yes, the voice acting is that way on purpose. At least I assume. Doesn't matter, I love it.
Excuse me.
Kato Buttered Cat combines two very prominent ideas. Cats always land on their feet, and buttered toast always lands buttered side down. So what if you put buttered toast on a cat? It's just a series of like platforming challenge rooms where sometimes you combine together and then it's like you can do infinite jumps because who knows what side you'll land on when you're both together. But then you can separate and then you have limited control as both characters and you gotta solve puzzles and how you guys work together before coming back together to move on to the next stage. It's just a bunch of puzzles which in any other context, whatever, but It's a cat with buttered toast on it, and then sometimes you go skating. It's one of those games where it's just so stupid, and it's such a simple idea that I love it. This game is great. We need more cat games anyway, and you throw butter toast in there. Such a genius idea. Okay, Cato, brilliant. Now we combine a crazy arcade racing game with a 3D platformer, Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. This game is insane. You essentially take the Mario Odyssey idea of filling up a big area with a bunch of collectibles, and you combine that with you're a car, and you can constantly stop what you're doing and get some boosts, and then just go at ridiculous speeds and do platforming that way. And sometimes you're racing like away from things, and sometimes you got to worry about handling a double jump, and this is unhinged. This is one unhinged video game. There are mustaches in the sky. Dude, early on, one of the levels is just filled to the brim with crazy taxi, okay? Like, you're still collecting, you're still platforming, but now you have a time limit, and you gotta bring passengers where they wanna go to get more time. This game is crazy. Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom is crazy. Peglin is a Peggle roguelike. That's it. You go down a tree, you pick some scenarios you wanna do. A lot of times you're just playing Peggle, where you let a ball go in a direction you want, you let whatever happen, and by doing this, you are accruing damage to do on the enemies that are in front of you, and there is some strategy there, but once again, it's Peggle, so a lot of it is just you kind of pray. But what's impressive is just how much variety that there is in the little things that you can do in between the battle scenes. The different scenarios that you can enter in the tree are pretty varied. A lot of the different orbs that you can add to your arsenal, there's a lot to consider there with how much damage they'll do. Maybe you'll summon more bombs, maybe you'll summon more respawn orbs. Like, there's a lot to consider with this game, but it's still nice and snappy because it's just Peggle. I feel like if you're not really all that interested in roguelikes, you don't know if that's going to be your genre, this would actually be a perfect entry point to that, because it's a gameplay loop you don't need to think about too hard, but it still has the core roguelike ideas where you're gonna die and restart a lot. Plus, look at this little guy. He's adorable. Incredibly biased with this because I already loved the first Frogun, and I'm blown away the sequel is already out there. Plus, my artist Kevin did the primary art for this game, so that's really cool to see. But Frogun Encore is here, and it kind of is just more of Frogun. There are some tweaks to the general way you play the game, in terms of play control, but you got these pretty basic levels. You got the frog gun that you can use to attack enemies from afar, mess with platforms that are a little bit away. There's extra stuff here like co-op and whatnot, it's cool. It doesn't really feel like a proper Frogun 2. Maybe in the future there could be a proper sequel, but as someone who really liked the original Frogun, because once again, I'm very biased to low poly 3D platformers, just having a Frogun Plus was perfect for me. So Frogun Encore gets a big ol' thumbs up. Also, shout out again to Kevin for doing the primary art for this game. It's on a Nintendo of America upload on the YouTube channel, and that's awesome. There were a few people who saw this and were tweeting oh man, this gives me AntDude vibes. It's surreal. That's surreal, but congrats to him. Fallen Leaf is yet another example of an 8-bit style 2D platformer, and I know there's plenty of those out there, but for me, what made this game stand apart was that its commitment to the bit, the 8-bit aesthetic, and the limitations that the NES would have are represented here, for the most part, outside of the widescreen thing, so I really like that. The music is really good, the play control is really good, and any story is honestly pretty minimal. You just play as two kids, you're going through these big and nature-filled environments, you got these towns where you can interact with NPCs, that's nice. Both characters have slightly different play control, and you can swap between them on the fly. That's cool. Plus, you get some additional characters along the way. Always nice to have more options. It's just a really good NES-style platformer. If I haven't made this clear already, sometimes that is exactly what I need. This gave me exactly what I wanted at the time. Love this game. Another Crab's Treasure is a very interesting case for me because honestly, I don't have that much experience with Souls games, and from what I do have, I don't know, not the biggest fan. They're fine, I guess. I can just accept that they're not really super my thing. However, I've also shown my bias to games where you're just a little guy going on little adventures, so we take an underwater little guy going on a little adventure. It happens to be a Souls-like, and yeah, it is very challenging. I died a lot, and I would make people who play Souls games probably cringe a lot at how bad I was at this game, but there's also platforming, because it's also a platformer, and that's the stuff I was good at. I can't help my biases. But everything about this game, from the art style to the music, the slight bits of humor with the underground area being filled with a bunch of pollution and stuff that has sunken down into the water, plus the story goes some pretty cool places. The end game is super cool. Another Crab's Treasure isn't just a kiddie Souls game. There's a lot to go into this, and I'm very happy that I got through it. My first Souls game, and it featured just a little guy putting soda cans on his back and whatnot, all because he didn't do good keeping up with his debt. So, relatable, I guess. In a playstyle that honestly doesn't get emulated as much as you think it would, Berserk Boy attempts to go for a Mega Man Zero, Mega Man X style of the game. Rather than just being a simple pixelated platformer, there's a lot more high action and combat and high octane experiences here. There's a combo meter that you can keep focus on at all times if you want to. You can transform into a big robot guy and go zipping through the environments. It's one of those platformers where you're not playing it for like the cool vibes necessarily, you're just playing it to be a little bit of a badass. I did have some frustrations for sure in some of the level designs, finding some characters that I needed to in order to progress. This is by no means a perfect game, but I still kept coming back to it because just slamming into enemies and zapping them and whatnot, like it felt really good. This is like that Gunvolt series, but better, I would say. You want a selling point? There you go. That's how Berserk Boy is. It's just a much better Gunvolt. Okay, if you don't know what the series is all about, it initially started with What the Golf and then What the Bat as a VR game, and now we have What the Car. And you play as a car, I think. All these What the games are just, you should play them. You should just play them. Levels begin and you're tasked with a thing to do, kind of WarioWare style. But whatever happens between that and you pressing your first button is entirely up in the air. This is another one of those games that has been out for a while. This was a mobile exclusive. This was an Apple Arcade game, and now it's finally available on at least PC and eventually consoles. What the Car? Yeah, man, this is a game. I can tell you that much. This is a video game. Dude, Parking Garage Rally Circuit, like, oh my god. So many games commit to the bit for having an N64 aesthetic or a PS1 aesthetic, but here we have a racing game that goes for the Sega Saturn look and it nails it perfectly. There are different modifiers that you can have to make sure the resolution is a little bit higher and the view distance is higher, so that's all fine and dandy, but even still, like, the play control is simple, the backgrounds are simple, sometimes the music is this overly corny and cheesy vocal track that's just so good for the soul, and it's just like a really basic, simple racing game. And it's hilarious that it's like, oh man, you're traveling all around the world to these different areas, but it's just different backdrops because the entire time you're just racing around in parking garages. Like, this is so, oh man, I love this. Worth keeping in mind that this is a racing game in the sense that it's just mostly a time trial thing. Like, you can see the ghosts of other cars along the way, but that doesn't really affect things too much. It's all about you figuring out the level, figuring out the turns, and trying to make your best times. And then you have a few other cars that you can unlock along the way. It is a very straightforward game, but just for how good they nailed the Sega Saturn look, I gotta give it props because man, I had a blast with this. The Plucky Squire for the longest time was my most anticipated game ever since its inception. Like, it looked fantastic and I was so excited for the adventure that it was going to put me on because I knew I was going to play it. And when I got around to it, a lot of people seemed to complain that it was just far too easy, but quite frankly, that's not why I was playing this game. The Plucky Squire is not a difficult adventure, by no stretch. I was playing this because, man, this art style and the storytelling with this art style is immaculate. I love the storytelling cutscenes where there's a narrator sort of telling the bedtime story to you as everything is playing out. The entire concept of the villain of this story is just sick and tired of the story being told over and over again, so finally he goes to mess with history, essentially, and make himself the true bad guy who wins this time, so you have to stop that. The only thing I was truly concerned with is the whole going from 2D to 3D thing being overdone, but really, no, there's a lot of creative things that you do in swapping between those different styles. There's a lot of messing with the book on the fly. There's a lot of times that throughout the day, more parts of the environment around the book become accessible. And the things that you do in those 3D spaces, especially in regards to platforming, are pretty varied. Challenge, not the Plucky Squire's strong suit at all, but charm, 100%. This is exactly the game I wanted, and I think this team nailed it. Plus, that's another little guy going on a little adventure. Listen, I have a type, okay? This is what I do. Anton Blast made its Wario Land roots so painfully apparent from the split second its existence was known, and in this final product, oh my god, I love this game so much. Just like, man, the amount of explosions and screen shaking in this game, it kind of goes for a world record, honestly. There's not a ton of levels in this game, there's only about a dozen or so, but there are just so many things packed into every single level. So many collectibles, so many secrets, so many weird twists and turns, and Anton as a character, is hilarious. He's too red of a guy and the devil don't like that, so he wants to take him out. It's beautiful. Anton Blast is a total attack on the senses in the best way. It's so good, it's so replayable. There's a bunch of Crash Bandicoot-like stuff in here, like the Crash Team Racing boost meter for nailing combos. That's intense. It took a few years for this game to finally manifest itself, but it did, and it was well worth the wait. God, it's such a good game. There's a scream button, man. There's just a button where you yell. It's perfect. A ranger builds itself off of one basic idea. Rather than just simply moving across this top-down world, everything moves around you in a tile-by-tile fashion. I essentially always think of Pac-Man, the whole idea where you can go through the wall one side, come out the other. You take that concept and mix it with a top-down adventure game, there's a lot. It turns out there's a lot you can do with that. Like sometimes there are enemies you have to take out, but you yourself don't do combat, there's just a sword you can move around, so you have to figure out how to move these tiles in such a way they can attack and also get through safely. Really gets the mind thinking. And then you have more simple uses of it where you have to backtrack to a certain area, but it's a whole winding loop. You could go the entire way if you want to, but otherwise you could just keep going through the opposite side of the wall and show up on the other side, and then boom, there you go. A Ranger was a game where I thought I had an idea of where this game was going with its puzzles all the time, and then I kept getting blown away with just how much I had to think, and that was a nice change of pace. A Ranger is a thinking man's game, and I appreciate it for it. Cash Cow DX is another entry in this long line of games that are releasing as of late that are replicating the classic arcade style of game, and I am a total sucker for that stuff. There's not much to this. You're a cow and you're collecting cash, gotta avoid the bad guys, and yeah, that's it. Just keep doing that, and it's hard. It's hard to really nail everything, and that's exactly what I love in a game like this. This is really one of those games that just in this 30 seconds that you've been looking at this game, you can already tell if you want it or not, and if you do, I can tell you this is one of the good ones. More indie arcade platformers, please. These all rock. Garbanzo Quest may seem like just another pixelated platformer, but here's where you're wrong. It's actually a bullet heck platformer. Dare I call it a run and spit type of game, because you play as Garbanzo. There he is. That's our favorite little guy, Garbanzo. And you run around and you spit on things and you save your friends who have all been taken. That's bad. And did I mention you are Garbanzo? That's him. That's Garbanzo. You can even play with the friend, and the friend could be Pinto. Look at him. Can you be the Garbanzo to save the day at the end? I think so. I think so. Only in Garbanzo Quest can you go about that. There he is. There's Garbanzo. Athenian Rhapsody answers one very specific question. What if we took a top-down story-based adventure and I don't know. Yeah, so obviously like the whole idea of a game like this popping up nowadays is pretty common, but Athenian Rhapsody is the only one with Thunder Goober in it, so there you go. That's a point in this game's favor. This adventure is just really funny, I believe, and it's also completely unhinged, and quite frankly, that is a combination for success. It is a lot of fun to play because you just have zero idea what's coming next. There isn't some sort of grand overarching plot where things get really emotional by the end. Like, nah, it just happens. It just happens. Plus, the whole selling point with this game is that you're building your very own story, your very own Rhapsody. Your story is your own, and you can share your story with your friends, and that is pretty cool. Your decisions matter in this game, and I like that. Athenian Rhapsody, a game where things happen, and it only happens to you. There you go. I played Vivid Loop a few years ago. I was sold on this style immediately, and last year, it was released on consoles finally. Thank goodness, because more people should play this game. It is awesome. It is a super basic idea. Run around these differently shaped environments as this cute little bunny thing, and change all the colors to the one they need to be, and do so as efficiently as possible. This is 100% a game that is a really solid puzzle idea that is more so really good to play because this style, oh man, this style is so good. I want to say it's like an HD sort of Dreamcast aesthetic. It's so dreamlike and poppy and just everything hits so well. It's like how I remember Choo Choo Rocket playing, like, you know? If you're a fan of puzzle games and adventures that are trying to really capture the Dreamcast part of your brain, Vivid Loop is for you. The original Grapple Dog is one of my favorite indie 2D platformers of all time. Just having a momentum-based platformer with a cute little dog named Pablo as the protagonist, oh, it was a recipe for success. I loved it. And then we got a sequel, Grapple Dog's Cosmic Canines. Acting as a proper follow-up, we kind of go multiversal with the plot now because, yeah, there's another universe at risk and you gotta save it, and now you're not the only guy. Pablo ain't the only hero this time around. This time, we also have Luna, who on top of having the grappling hook also has a gun this time. Oh, how edgy. And the way the game is structured is that there are levels based on Pablo and levels based on Luna. You alternate between the two very often, and the further on you get throughout the game, both characters get unique power-ups to go through, and it's just a lot of fun. And everything else that was really good about the first Grapple Dog is here. Graphics are great, music is super poppy, love the characterization, I love Luna, I love Pablo, the main antagonist of the first game is chilling out with you now. That's fun. That's a fun thing. And yes, you can still pet the dogs when you beat a level. That's important. I've come to accept that Penny's Big Breakaway isn't the Sonic Mania in 3D vibe that a lot of people wanted from this studio's first original game, but even with that being said, I really loved this game. One thing I knew this team was going to do when moving on to the third dimension was have the momentum and the play control feel super tight and that you could just flow through the levels with a high skill ceiling. And yeah, that's here. You could argue the skill ceiling is too high, and yes, the controls do take a while to get used to. But if you do take the time to really understand how this game works and you just click with it, the movement options that you have on hand and the way that the levels are designed around those movement options, you can do some cool things, and man, I loved this game. There's some extra polish that the game needs for sure, but that doesn't change the fact that throughout the entirety of this game, outside of when I was dying a lot, because I was dying a lot, I had a smile on my face. It's just, yeah, I was dying a lot, so that removed the smile for a little bit, but then I got it back. It just takes some time. Plus, like, the main enemies in this game are a bunch of penguins, and I love penguins, so maybe that's another bias of mine, I don't know. Dude, Pepper Grinder. Okay, if it also hasn't been made really abundantly clear, I love platformers where momentum is the key, and oh my god, I can't think of many other games I feel as good to get good at than Pepper Grinder. Because part of it is just a basic platformer, you're running and jumping around, of course, but a lot of this game is maneuvering around with this giant drill you have in your hands at all times to handle enemies for sure, but also dig through these massive underground areas and then pop out like a dolphin and figure out how to get to the next one. It just feels so damn satisfying. Half the fun of this game is just taking in how good the pixel work is and enjoying the really cool music and just feeling like a badass surfing through the underground areas, but then a lot of the fun is really digging through every little nook and cranny of this game to find the secrets, because there are a lot of secrets and there's a lot of skill you gotta have to get all those secrets, and getting good in this game with like the slingshots and the cannons and attacking enemies the right way, like god, this is just a cool game. If there's one word to describe Pepper Grinder, it's cool. This is a cool video game. I can't believe Gimmick 2 is real. I just can't believe it. This may not be as big of a deal to everybody, but just the fact this game exists is mind-boggling to me. I have been a fan of the NES Gimmick game for God knows how long now, and the fact that there's a sequel now and it's awesome, oh, I'm so happy. The core basis of this game is it's a 2D platformer where you, as a little guy going on a little adventure, what a surprise, have the ability to spawn a star over your head and shoot it out, and you use that for a ton of platforming opportunities. There is so many things you do with this star, from bouncing it off of a wall and then jumping on top of it and then landing on a platform that you can only get to by riding on the star for a little bit. And now in the addition for 2 that wasn't in 1, these little things that you can throw a star into to activate some platforms, making for some cool challenges because you can only have 1 star out at a time. That's pretty cool. If anything, I think the levels are too long in this game. Like, they go on for a while, so if you want to be a completionist, it's gonna take quite a bit of commitment to learn a whole lot of these levels inside and out, because there's a lot to this game, okay? And it may not have really good sprite work, and it may not have as punchy of a soundtrack as the original, but given that they attempted to make this game more substantial, I am totally fine with this art style. I am totally cool with the more atmospheric music. As far as a sequel to Gimmick, decades after the fact is concerned, this is perfect. Oh my god, I can't believe this is real. I just can't believe it's real. Yars Rising is just so fascinating to me. Atari has been firing on all cylinders lately if you've been looking at the games they've been pumping out, and having a Yars Revenge revival where you play as a girl who's a hacker and there's an alien storyline going on here and you're just kind of dealing with the basic evil, corrupted organization kind of plot. But the hacking scenarios are all like adaptations of different Atari games, primarily Yar's Revenge. This is surreal, but if you take all of the Atari fan service out of the way, what you're left with is just a really solid basic Metroidvania. You're gathering new abilities by doing those hacking segments, and then the story keeps ramping up to a pretty cool degree. The main character, Emi Kimura, is pretty adorable. The music is filled with a ton of music that sounds like J-pop, and it was just really catchy the whole time, and I love that whenever a new song popped up, it would tell you what the song is in the corner. That's cool. But if you're a Metroidvania fan and an old Atari enthusiast, Yar's Rising, this game is for you. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this game. And the more wacky reinterpretations of classic Atari IP, the better. It's time to figure out just what the duck from Adventure was, okay? Do something with that next. So we have another platformer here with declines drops, but rather than just assuming that it's gonna play like a typical platformer, what if it was a platformer that played like Super Smash Bros? Of course, it's not uncommon to have a platformer that has a bunch of combat in it, but it really just has like a Smash Bros style control scheme, but a lot better, like more tuned for a platformer, more so than Subspace Emissary was. You combine that with the really, really gorgeous hand-drawn style, really nice atmospheric music, and these really cool boss battles against these really big guys where this Smash Bros style control scheme comes to fruition perfectly. And you can see there's a combo meter on here too, so if you want to get really good at this game, your opportunity is right there. There's a lot to really enjoy about declines drops, especially as you progress on the game, because it does get kind of challenging, it does get a little bit difficult, but man, it's still so satisfying to nail all these moves. Like, man, what a great combination of styles this is. RZ's existence mystifies me. So you take the person who worked on a PC remastering of the garbage Zelda CDI games, and then they make their own Zelda CDI inspired game. They capture the perfect nuance of what made those CDI games so corny and cheesy, like the really adorable parts about those games. They make it actually kind of decent, and then you have play control that's pretty good. And wow, I really just feel like this shouldn't be real, but it is. There's like a weird clashing of art styles. The music doesn't necessarily feels like it fits in. The cutscenes are pretty jarring and everything just kind of moves all haphazardly, but the characters are endearing. The play control is actually pretty good. This combat is pretty limited, but it feels nice. The sound effects when you do that combat also sound pretty good. And outside of there being maybe a little bit too much backtracking, I had a blast with this game. I love seeing all these different platformers and any other genre really have their inspirations for different eras of gaming be so apparent, but CDI, I never thought I'd see the day where a CDI platformer would be this good. But it is. Man, RZ shouldn't exist, but I'm so happy it does. This is a great game. To me, easily a contender for one of the best horror games of all time, Crow Country. This is a mind-blowing experience. So much of why this game is remarkable would go into spoiler territory and start showing things in the bit of a late game. It's not the longest game in the world for sure, but everything that's compacted into this few-hour adventure, it's just so well thought out and intriguing, and everything that's going on in this crow-themed theme park that's abandoned. You play as this girl. Why is she here? Of course there's monsters. Why are they here? And man, again, the art style, trying to really be like a PS1 styled game. You kind of think that maybe when you're starting things off that these are all pre-rendered backgrounds, but then you rotate the camera and you find out, no, this is all 3D. It looks incredible. The music is so eerie. I love the dialogue, and just playing it through a second time after knowing exactly what's going on, it opens your eyes to so many more things, and the story is so good, and man, easily one of the best horror games of all time. And it's by the developers who made Snipper Clips. That's insane. Man, okay, thank goodness you're here is the most British thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like, it's such Britain overload, and I a lot of times I don't know what to make of it. It's just a little adventure game. I guess you do constitute as a little guy. You know, the size is kind of subjective with everything else that's going on in this world. And I don't know. You kind of just run around, talk to NPCs, and you do quests, and every time they see you for the first time, they're like, oh, thank goodness you're here. See, there you go. That's the title of the game. The voice acting is ridiculous. The animation is ridiculous. A lot of times, once again, I don't know what's going on. I'm just pushing forward and letting whatever happens, and assuming I know what I'm doing. Quite frankly, there's like a joke and a quip at every single corner of this game. If you're a fan of comedy adventures, and I'm trying to figure out what constitutes as British comedy, then thank goodness you're here. Man, what a time. Dude, like the opening credits of this game is like this old-timey colored footage of I guess Britain. What? This is so weird. This is a crazy time. This is a crazy video game. Mini Shoot Adventures combines two genres in a way that I never even thought possible before, but this is a top-down Zelda-styled game where instead of playing as a little guy going on a little adventure, you're a little ship going on a little adventure. This is a twin-stick shooter in the style of a top-down Zelda game. You got an overworld to explore, you got secrets to uncover, you got dungeons to go through, bosses to destroy, power-ups to get, but you're doing it all as a ship. That's so cool. This idea is just so unique. It's very rare nowadays for me to say that I have not played anything like this before. And obviously there are parts of this game that I can say I've played before, like a Zelda-styled game, but in this format, nah, never seen before. And I'm happy it's a thing now because this is a pretty damn cool game. Now on the topic of top-down Zelda-styled games, here we have Castaway, which was initially pitched as a bite-sized Zelda game, and it truly is. It took me 30 minutes to beat this game. This is another example of a game that I was sold on the art style. I love how this game looks. The music is nice and punchy, and it does play really well. I mean, it is a Zelda-styled game, but it all takes place on one island. Your ship crashes, you got 3 things you gotta find, you find the 3 things, it's not super challenging, bada bing, bada boom. But what is kind of cool is once you do the campaign, that was sort of like a tutorial for the main part of this game, this tower that you can climb, and suddenly, it's like a roguelike. You're climbing a bunch of floors, you're leveling up, and every time you level up, you get a new perk that you can use to like upgrade your speed or upgrade your attack strength and just see if you can make it to the top. Took me a few tries, but again, not a super long game. This is a bite-sized adventure at a cheap price. I think this is a really good time. Sometimes you need a video game you can complete in an afternoon. This did that for me, and I have no regrets. Castaway, good time. In my opinion, the indie game of the year 2024 and should have been in the running for game of the year 2024 is UFO 50. Everything in this video up until now has been a nice truncated 1 to 2 minute review of an indie game that I really enjoyed. I can't do that with this game, okay? This is a package that has 50 fully fleshed out indie games of a wide variety of genres, and I do not understand. Like, it's insane. This is an insane project. Essentially, there is some in-game lore with this video game company, UFO Soft, having 50 games that are released over the span of many years, and that context is really only to show off how cool this menu is, because the further along you go, you can see some advancements in like graphics and music. Sometimes their logo will change, but at the end of the day, this is still 50 fully fleshed out games. If you don't like one, that's fine. Move on to the next one. Like the very first game, Barbuda, I don't like this game. It controls weird. It's very confusing. I don't like Barbuda. I'm interested in its secrets, but as a gamer, as a player, not a fan. But dude, then there's like a ninja platformer and a painting racing game and a puzzle game where you're collecting a bunch of little orb guys and trying to get them into a line successfully. And then you got these games where you like sacrifice a bunch of army guys to progress in this like weird platforming adventure. There's a vertical roguelike platformer. Dude, there's so much. I think I just explained 5 or 6 of the games. There's 50 in here. I think my favorite currently is this classic JRPG that's a Western. So a Western JRPG, which is a hilarious concept, but that's just my favorite now. That could honestly change in the next day or so whenever I go back to this, because it's crazy. UFO 50 is an absolute achievement and one of the most ambitious games of all time, I would say, because I can't believe the value you get with this. Every indie game in this video that I talked about, I love, if I didn't make that totally clear, but UFO 50 stands head and shoulders above the rest, and it needs a full-on video essay into itself to explain why it's so good. But if you like what you see, give it a shot, because man, you haven't played anything like this before. And there you have it. There's all the different indie games I played last year. If you liked any of the games I saw, please go check these games out. I know the developers and the publishers would totally appreciate it because there's so many good games that are releasing on a regular basis that don't get the recognition that they deserve. And this chunk of games is a perfect example of that. That being said though, I know that there are plenty of indie games that did release just last year alone that I didn't get around to. 1000X Resist, Crypt Custodian, Locomotive, Duck Detective, 9 Souls, Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip, Squirrel with the Gun. Oh my god, how could I have not played Squirrel with the Gun yet? If you enjoyed this style of video, I will return to this concept later on with a whole lot more indie games to play because I adore the indie game scene so much and want to shine a light on as many games as possible, but I can only play so much because there's 30 plus in here, man. There was a lot of games that came out last year, right? If you have any other recommendations or if you have any other thoughts on the games I talked about today, leave them down below. I'd love to see it. One final shout out to Garbanzo, I guess, because there he is. That's Garbanzo.